Hi, this is a tutorial showing how you can use the app Adobe Photoshop Mix to create a photo mosaic type effect on a photo. So the first thing we need to do is collect all of the overall images, the images that we want to create the large image out of. And you need to be thinking carefully about what you're choosing. So today what I'm going to do is actually do a bit of a juxtaposition or an opposite effect using a picture of someone who looks a bit tough with some flowers. So I'm going to go across to my browser. Normally I would use Google image search for searching, but Bing actually seems to work better for being able to get images down onto my iPad quickly. So I've just done a search here for flower, and you can see I've got lots of options, and I can just click on a photo and then click on save image to save it into my camera roll. Now if you are wanting to be selective, then clearly you would go through and you would select all of those images one at a time and consider how much contrast is in the photos, because if there is too much contrast then they might take away from your overall picture. The other cheat way to do it is to take a shot of the screen, so using the screenshot buttons, and you already have a grid of photos there, and this is one reason why I use Bing, because you can see here it fills the whole screen without the big white gaps that seem to be currently in the setup of the way that Google Images shows their images. Do want to think though about how precise you are with your search words, because the more precise you are, the more of a consistent type of photo you're going to get, which will then distract less from your overall picture. So in this case, I'm going to not just use flowers, but I'm going to use roses, and I'm going to use red roses. Okay, and you can see I've got a whole screen there of red roses, and I can just hit the two buttons to create a screenshot, and that image is now on my camera roll. So I can then keep scrolling and collect some more images of red roses for me to be able to use. Okay, of course, if you're wanting to be more careful about your images, and you can see there's a couple of photos that are very similar and might look repetitious. We've got some photos that have got lots of contrast between the blue sky and the red roses, where we've got other photos which are completely filled with roses. So if you've got the time, you'd want to be much more selective with the photos you're using. But I'm just doing a quick tutorial here. Alright, so if we go into Adobe Photoshop Mix, we're going to start with a new composition, and we're going to use an image to start it. Now you can see I've got all those screenshots of the red roses up the top there, and then there's some screenshots just of normal flowers. You can use the actual previews you've got here to collect your images. So if you've collected your images one at a time, and you can then fill the whole screen here with your flowers or whatever your images are, then you notice the white gaps in between your photos are a lot smaller. So if I had time, I would actually select all of my photos individually, save them to my camera roll, and then I would take a screenshot now rather than taking the screenshot that I've just taken from Bing search, because that way I'm going to get less white gap in between the pictures. Okay, but the way that I've done it at the moment, you can see I've already got a lot of selections here. So if I was to collect that many images as I've got in the flowers, the roses at the top, I would have had to take it a lot longer to collect all my images of my flowers. So The other thing you can do is if you are wanting to create the effect of lots and lots of small photos really quickly, you would do the screenshots like I've done at the top, but do enough to fill the whole screen here. So you can see that's 5 across the top there, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if you did 25 screenshots, that would fit the whole edge. But what you can see is that the gap between each of those screenshots is larger than the gap in between the individual images. And I'm not really happy with that to be used in this instance. Of course, you can edit down each of those screenshots and chop off the edges, but the way I'm going to do it at the moment is just bring one of these screenshots in at a time. So I choose one of those images there. Okay, the first thing I'm going to need to do is to cut that down so that I have only got the pictures there. So if I just go to cutout, and I'm going to use the shape cutout. So normally when it comes in, it'll come in with a smart cutout, but I'm just going to use the shape cutout at the moment. I'm going to add, and I'm just going to draw on a rectangle here, and I'm going to go a little bit that way so that I can then drag it back here. Okay, and that's what I'm happy with. So it's chopped it down just to those photos there. Okay, I'm going to scale that down over here, and I'm going to add in my next image and crop it again and scale that down. Put that up. Now, of course, you can be very careful with this and cropping everything so that you get the right amount of gaps between your photos. But I'm just trying to do a quick tutorial here. Notice that the app will lock into the spot. And I'm getting different lengths because of the amount of photo I'm cutting off because of the different sizes of the original images in Bing. And we're actually wanting to go a bit smaller here. I'm not going to do anything about that just yet because I've still got to bring in my main image, which will resize at my canvas. And you can see a good reason there for not doing it. The screenshots I've got that one there that says "for you" on it. Okay, so that's just a rough bring in of that many at the moment. I'm going to bring in now my image that I'm going to want to make these all from, and that's my picture here. And if I resize the canvas, you can see it's actually made that canvas a lot bigger. So I'm going to fit more of these flower images in. Now I'm just going to move that image over a little. Okay. Okay, now you can see I've actually reached the limit of the number of photos that I can bring in, which is fine because I was wanting to make these flowers a lot smaller anyway. So I'm just going to show you how I can actually do this. So I'm going to take the top layer and I'm going to tap on it twice or hold on it and say merge down. Now you can see I've got two images on those, and I'm going to merge down again and merge down again and merge down again. Right, now I've just got one left here, but I'm still got that gap at the bottom. Now I'm actually liking the fact that I'm not getting a really even grid pattern happening here. So I'm going to merge these down, and I have them all together here. Now that's great because now what I can do is take this whole big set of flowers and I can duplicate that layer and bring it in. Now I could do it straight across, but you can see the pattern of that really obvious rose there with the white coming through a bit too much. So I'm going to actually offset this down a bit. Maybe put it there. Try not to leave a gap between. And I'll duplicate it again. This time putting this one. Trying not to cut off any flowers to just tiny slithers, but square is fine. And then duplicate it again. And of course we can also flip these around to make it even less like a repeated pattern. But I think this is quite alright. So I'm going to just merge all of those together. Okay, now I'm not going to go any further at this stage. I might want to make the flowers smaller, but let's just check and see what it looks like. So I'm going to bring my image layer with the photo on it right up to the top. So we just hold and drag up to the top. Now we can see it at the top. Now I'm going to blend mode. Now have a look at the different blend modes to see which one you think is going to work best, so that it actually looks like it is different colored photos rather than a picture overlaid. So the color one, it isn't too bad. Overlay works quite well, and you might think that you can't see the picture well enough here. So what you can do, obviously, whenever you do any of these effects, you can adjust how transparent it is, but you can also duplicate that layer and use a different effect. So if I use one on overlay and one on multiply, I can adjust it so that I can see the picture enough through the flowers. Now, at the moment, to me, it's still really obvious that the flowers themselves aren't making up the photo, and that it is just what I'm doing with an overlay. So what I'm going to do is make the flowers even smaller again. So I'm going to take those and going to shrink them down by half. Duplicate the layer. Now note that I'm not using the effect on these, I'm using the effect on the other picture, because that way I can keep just layering these on top of each other without having to worry about the overlay or the other effects affecting the other flower pictures.
Okay, and go again.
And of course, once I've got those four together there, I can merge them down, duplicate them, and then I can make a full width of these photos. And I'm just going to merge it down just to make it easier to deal with. Of course, I could go even smaller if I wanted, but for the purposes of this video, that's small enough. And finally, I want to crop it down just so that I just have that picture. So the crop is up in the other corner, and I'm just going to crop down. Right, so I have my picture here, and I have a picture that I can zoom in, and I can see it's actually made up of photos of flowers. But if I zoom out, it is actually face. Now, you'll see when I zoom right in, you can see where I've misaligned those photos. Obviously, you can take a lot more time to make the effect work properly. And I think actually I would like the photos of the flowers just a bit smaller. So I'm going to shrink them down even more. Right. So now I have my picture that looks like my portrait, but when I zoom right in, I can see that it's pictures of flowers, even though it looks like a picture of a punk. And of course, you can adjust this as much as you want until you are happy with how much your picture is showing through and how much the background, the images it's made up of, are showing through, to give you that illusion that you've actually painstakingly chosen each little colour of your picture. Of course, when you're finished, you just export it to camera roll, or of course you can go into Photoshop and open in Photoshop on your computer and do more work. And that is complete.